They use 40% of the world's energy, emit 50% of its greenhouse gases. They are not the cars we drive. They are the buildings where we work, live, and grow. Buildings designed with an unconscious disregard for nature. Adopting sustainable alternatives is not only a matter of progress, it's a matter of survival. Design E squared, the economies of being environmentally conscious. Not even the Great Wall can hold back the math. Nowhere else are the economics of being environmentally conscious more apparent than in China. Will the country of 1.3 billion people be the tipping point of the Earth's environmental fate? Or will it be its savior? Will China's unprecedented growth be the engine for extinction?
China matters so much because it's the giant economic engine, and commerce is the engine of change. So the world will change most dramatically as a result of the Chinese activity.
What's happening in China is unprecedented in human history, and personally I don't think we will ever see it happen again. It's the largest mass rural to urban migration in human history. Every year, 15 to 20 million people will be moving from the countryside to cities.
China will build new housing for 400 million people in the next 12 years. If you look at that in the context of the United States, that would be like rebuilding all the housing in the U.S. in 7 years. Now, if they built that with brick, in 174 jurisdictions, they would lose all their soil and burn all their coal, which means they'd have cities with no energy and no food.
如果我们犯了一些错误，在这15年里头，那么等于是我们就会给后代、给子孙后代带来极大的问题、极大的困难。Not only， 并且不光是对我们的后代，大概会给整个人类带来灾难。就像刚才说的是，因为那么的话，中国的这个每这个消耗在建筑物里边的能源，相当于全球的40%了，就不得了了。
We should be concerned about China because of the material resources of the world. I mean, if they don't do sustainable work, they will destroy it. They will destroy our air quality, our water quality. I think everything interchanges on the earth. Everything works together as a system. Nobody is free from anybody else's pollution.
China's pollution is not just China's problem. According to an EPA study, about a quarter of the particulate matter floating over Los Angeles can be attributed to China. And as the world's largest producer and consumer of coal, every 2 years, China adds the equivalent of the country of Brazil to its power grid.
We're seeing an economy that, for the last 20 years, has grown at 8 to 10%. That is an unprecedented amount of wealth grown. 20 years ago, 400 million people in China were living on less than $1 a day. And that number has gone from 400 million people living on $1 a day or less to 200 million. That's just almost the entire population in the United States doubling their wealth. You've got people that have been living in cold, dark shacks for a long time. And all of a sudden, and small, cold, dark shacks. And all of a sudden they're getting some wealth. And of course they want a bigger apartment, they want electric light, they want heat.
I think one of the huge issues is that any country that's trying to modernize will mimic the United States. And it looks very seductive. This world of ours that everyone sees through all the media is very attractive to people who don't have these things.
In China, some people getting rich, right? So then for the rich men, they say, maybe we should improve my living standard. They learned everything from United States, from West Europe. They build similar single house, they use similar air conditioning, they use similar domestic hot water. Then they consume similar amount of energy as you. And this rich people, the portion of the rich people now is getting larger and larger. So that is very dangerous. If every family do things like that, China have 1.3 billion population, then what will happen? You can guess.
I mean, it would be really easy for this to come across as it's all China's fault, which is 180 degrees from what I want to say. But as China goes, so goes the planet. That's just too many people are doing too much stuff for that not to be the case. And the pace at which things happen will either save us or sink us, depending upon how quickly we help China innovate and how quickly China helps itself innovate and get these ideas into practice.
The Tsinghua University Energy Research Building is China's attempt to collate and improve on the best energy efficiency technologies the world has to offer.
一直在想法用各种各样的方法来影响这个建筑商、设计师，这个包括业主，用尽可能多的用这个建筑节能的方法来这用各种各样建筑节能的技术啊，各种各样建筑节能的产品用在自个儿的 building 建筑上去减少建筑能耗。那么现在这个楼里头大概有全世界近100种有关建筑节能的技术跟产品都在这个建筑物里边。
Open for only 6 months, Professor Yi and the Energy Research Building have already received over 20,000 visitors. The center has also developed several new energy-saving technologies, including a solar air conditioning system.
Developers come here to learn, to see, and try to copy some of the technology from this building to their own. And also there's a large group of people there. They are very, very good in simulation. They do a lot of modeling to help the people to design better performance buildings. And this all the different combination for BCHP system, building combined heating and power generation. We install about 2,000 sensors for this building. So then the students use all the computer to collect the data to carry on some analysis. That's why, as you said, it's a very, very big lab. Test bench. It's not a real building, it's a test bench, you can say.
From test bench to proven methods, the Accord 21 building opened in 2000, becoming the first internationally certified green project in China.
Accord 21 is a demonstration project that was the result of a bilateral agreement between the U.S. government and the Chinese government. What the building has to show for that is 70% reduction in energy saving compared to standard practice, 60% reduction in the water consumption compared to the allocation from Beijing, great indoor air quality, very high construction recycling, specification of non-toxic local materials, a lot of really great stuff.
那么我们这个楼最值得别人学习的，并不是我采用了哪项技术，而是我把这100多项技术综合起来、集成起来。我没有用最先进的，但是我用的是最能解决问题的技术。大家知道，今年这个北京供电比较紧张，但是我们政府的机关如果做到节能，不要做到我这个70%几，做到节约能源50%，是吧？不要所有的楼都做，只要有1/2的楼做到了这一点，那么北京不但能源不紧张，能源还要向外输出。
We keep getting inspectors from the Water Bureau, inspectors from the Energy Bureau, coming, pulling out the meters, taking them apart, putting them back together, and then watching to see that we're not cheating. And this has happened several times. They've come, they've inspected, they've probed, they've investigated, and because nobody can believe how little water and how little energy we're using, because it's just unheard of.
事实是最能说明问题的。原来呢，有些人有怀疑的态度，现在呢，要求参观这个楼的人，我都接应不暇。那么下个礼拜呢，中国国务院要召开政府机关，办公大楼的这个节约能源的会议，我就要参观我们这个楼。
The government's goal is to quadruple the economy by 2020, while only doubling energy use. A conundrum only to be solved by the enforcement of green building standards.
China is beginning to implement energy efficiency standards and green buildings essentially because they have no choice, and they know it. Their resource consumption is growing so fast that economically it's really hard to keep track of. Buildings are now the largest source of water pollution across the country and the biggest consumer of clean water. And so they're realizing that they just can't keep fouling their nest anymore if they want to achieve their social and economic development goals.
今后呢，就是说，你要是污染，你要是不节约能源，这个建筑政府就不批准你建。建好了还要罚款，还要停止使用。当然这些事情呢，不是一天就能做成的，但是政府有关的部门，一些研究政策的、研究法律的、研究技术的部门，正在组织有关的专家出台这样的文件。
I mean, it's interesting because, everybody thinks of communism, totalitarian, authoritarian, etc. Well, believe me, the buildings that don't comply with the standards, you would think that, they would be taken away and shot. No. But people just look the other way. Because what are you going to do? The building's built, we need people to, people need to go in there, so that's what it is. Here, if you don't build your building to code, you can't occupy, by and large. Ironically, in this free society, we're much more authoritarian in many respects than in this particular area than the Chinese are. But the Chinese are recognizing the importance of enforcement, and it's just a huge job building up that infrastructure.
An infrastructure whose delay comes at a cost. It's estimated that between 8 and 10% of China's gross domestic product is wasted dealing with pollution and its health effects. Tragically, 1 in 4 Chinese die from lung disease. So, who are some of the developers taking the initiative to tackle these problems?
当代投资公司呢是一家名字大家可以知道是一家投资公司。我们投资的领域呢有很多，但是最主要的是在住宅工程上的投资。对绿色建筑有这种需求，市场的需求。但是这个 Lindhammer 的这个项目呢非常特别，因为呢这是我们第一次和美国建筑师合作，而且第一次呢整个在一个项目里头全面的应用绿色建筑和可持续发展的这个思想来指导我们的建设。
Designed by New York architect Stephen Hall, the Linked Hybrid project broke ground December of 2005. With views of Beijing's Forbidden City, 60 units pre-sold in the first week. The design not only embraced green principles, but also the basic tenets of Chinese philosophy.
We decided that because of feng shui principles, ancient Chinese principles, that there would be no beams in the apartments. If you're underneath a beam in feng shui, that's terrible, bad luck. So we said, okay, according to feng shui principles, we will have no beams in the apartments. That means we'll have flat slabs, and then that brought us to the idea of putting the structure all in the outside. But then because we put the structure on the outside, we could deep set the windows. Now we can use the thermal mass of the concrete to temper the heating and cooling of the building, making it more thermally resistant, set the windows back, get a natural sun shading effect from that.
There will be roughly about 650 or 700 apartment units. We're putting nearly almost all the roof on the ground, every surface making landscape surface. So all these roofs are covered with landscapes. So it's not only provide a beautiful landscape seen from above from the apartment, it's also making cool down all the buildings, make it very sustainable.
At the heart of this energy-efficient strategy lies a heating and cooling system that taps into an infinitely renewable source, geothermal wells.
To cool and heat this large amount of buildings, almost 1.5 million square feet of apartment spaces alone, we have worked as a modern group to devise a system that uses the ground source geothermal system to cool and heat the building.
The geothermal well goes down 100 meters to a stable water temperature in the water table of 51 degrees. And there's a return pipe which always taps that 51 degrees. And at the top, then there's heat exchangers that convert that into cooling in the summer and heating in the winter.
This application is, we have found today, is the largest application in the world in residential buildings. There's 600 geothermal wells going down 100 meters deep. It's enormous amount of engineering project.
绿色建筑呢，不论是在中国还是在美国或者在其他国家，都会意味着成本的增加。但是呢，当代认为中国现在需要对建筑有一个新的思考。
It's not only important to make the building itself sustainable. In other words, you use all the available technology to make it a green architecture. But more importantly, we want to reinvent a city.
One of the huge problems they've had in Beijing is that they sort of were looking at, the segregation of residential and commercial from the U.S., and now all of a sudden all these buildings are going up around the 4th, 5th ring road, and distances for cycling, which used to be 6 or 7 kilometers, are now 16 or 17 kilometers. Who wants to ride their bike that far? And so all of a sudden, decisions that were made 20 years ago are forcing people out of bicycles and into cars. And unfortunately, China has glommed onto cars as being this economic engine survival, and they're driving themselves right off a cliff.
A project like this offers a new model for pedestrian-oriented community, a city within a city where you have everything you need. The shops, your living, your working, your recreation, the spa, the health club, everything is in one place, so you don't need to get in your car and drive across the city.
它关于这种城市的混合功能、混合社区，对于开放社区的这种设计思想呢，跟中国现在的住宅设计呢有很大的区别。
The city fabric is being changed to pointed towers. We want to bring back an urban life. We want to make the building connect at different levels, and they're all open and porous. So the circulation and the connectivity become a central aim of the project. And so all the public can come here, become a destination, almost like the Rockefeller Center in New York.
Beijing's abundance of traffic is a serious issue. But what about the shortage of the precious resource of water?
Water is a very big aspect in China, especially in Beijing. The water shortage is going to be an enormous problem in the future. But when you have an apartment building, you have all this water from washing your hands, taking showers, what we call gray water, that if you're careful, you could run a separate plumbing system and reuse all that water.
We created this large pond of about 7,000 square meters large. All the
gray water from 700 apartments are collected to a central processing plant over between these two towers in the basement. Under a process, and the water being pumped back to the apartment to flush toilet. Same time also do the irrigation and also feeding the pond. In China, as we said, there's a will, there's a way, but it won't be easy, this effort and this path. But I think, to save the future, this is something we have to do, and we are trying our best to set an example in this project.
Right now, the way our economic and finance system works is that most costs and benefits of everything essentially become zero within one generation. Again, that is completely against physical and chemical reality. A lot of the garbage we put into the environment lasts hundreds of generations. We need to bring human rules, and particularly economics, into line with physical realities.
They're toxifying China right now, making toxic stuff, and polluting everything. Then they're going to send us the result of that. And then we'll toxify ourselves as we put it in landfills. Well, what we do in China are essentially conceptual master planning. So we do conceptions of the new cities, or extensions of cities, or integrations into existing cities. In a city in the south, we're proposing that the earth all be lifted up onto the roofs, and the entire roof of the city become farms. It's really there as a tone poem to send out an iconic image of what it would mean for a city to still make oxygen and still make food. And then looking at all the materials underneath those roofs as safe, healthy things that provide benefit for all people of all time. So it's really a deep integration of ancient culture and future culture, understanding the problems that need to be solved by design.
In an ideal world, our species, capable of design, would design for its future. The ideas and the technology exist today. What is needed is the desire for change, manifested not only in idealists, but in the common people.
我觉得最重要的是对公众的教育，国民素质的提高。如果公众都认识到绿色建筑的重要，都有这种对绿色建筑有这种需求，市场的需求是这个推动绿色建筑最重要的动力之一。我觉得。
Anyone under 30 in architecture, in practicing architecture or any design, is beginning to look at this sustainability seriously. I think they have a much more holistic idea about what they want to do.
There are more designers in China than anywhere else right now. I mean, it's quite surprising. There are 4,000 students of industrial design in the United States. Do you know how many there are in China? 200,000. Revolutions, as Jefferson pointed out, can happen when 5% of the influencers reach the tipping point. And I think in China, we're about to see 5% of the influencers reach the tipping point. So they are a totalitarian regime. And once they start turning the cranks on something, it's surprising how quickly things can happen.
我还是有信心的，因为是这样啊，比如说像我们在屋顶搞了一个屋顶花园，但是呢，大家一看好，现在北京呢总有100多个屋顶花园了，所以在中国这个国家里，当人们认识到这件事情是必须要做的，而且要做好，那么它发展的速度是不可思议的。
We should find some new way to meet the requirement for living standard reason, but reduce the energy consumption, not follow the same approach like the United States have there. That's terrible. That's not a good idea. We should find some new way to go. Otherwise, the whole global, whole world will be collapsed.
Will China's rise to world power coincide with the world's demise? Or will the culture that developed the compass steer mankind away from consuming itself? Can a country rooted in the deep belief of the Tao, that all things are connected and an equal part of each other, show us the way?
For more information on this series, go to pbs.org. To order the 6-part DVD of Design E2, call PBS Home Video at 1-800-PLAY-PBS.